So, a news update for this podcast. There has been a slight change from the government. They are now out to consultation on the bits and pieces that we're talking about through this podcast. Oliver, do you want to tell us a bit more about the consultation?
Yeah, well, I think obviously we called it about right within our original podcast. What we were talking about has come to be within the consultation that's been issued by the Department of Energy Security and Net Zero DESNZ. So they've launched their consultation on the electricity network infrastructure consents, land access and rights consultation. That's on the back of all the workshops, the good work that they've been doing across energy infrastructure with all relevant stakeholders being part of that work, which was on the back of the call of evidence in 2022. So an awful lot has happened since then. So they're out to consultation. The consultation closes on the 2nd of September. So I encourage people to get involved in that. There'll then be some further work by government before they make their recommendations to ministers. So still a lot to do, but some good stuff that is being consulted on at present.
And as you said, Oliver, we gave it a good old guess last time we spoke, and so I'd suggest listen on to hear what we talked about, and then, as Oliver says, get involved, give your feedback to the government. This is a change. I fear this isn't the change that's needed in its entirety, but it's the beginning of what needs to happen. So exciting times ahead, and listen on to hear about it. Thanks, guys. Welcome to the DMU and I podcast. Today it's all about networks, electricity networks, the pressure they're under, the challenge that they've got ahead. I'm talking to Oliver Heselton, who as an absolute pro in this world, has been involved in lots of different aspects of it, up with government, looking at the legislation reform, whether that be the CAV briefing note that's come out or the potential changes to the Electricity Act. We're going to talk about it all during this podcast, so listen on. Welcome to DM's You and I, and I'm joined today by Oliver Heselton, who has been with DM for a few weeks now. He describes himself as a grumpy Yorkshireman living in Lancashire. I'm slightly scared he's at the other side of the table because he also has told me he's been media trained. So, that slightly terrifies me because I certainly haven't. But anyway, we'll watch on and we'll see. But Oliver, welcome. Do you want to just give us a quick overview of you, your background? How on earth have you managed to end up here?
Thank you, James. Yeah, with pleasure. My background, I've been involved in utilities and infrastructure for just a little over 30 years. I'm not going to say just how many years over 30 years. I've stopped counting a little while ago. Started off in private practice, as many do, working against utility companies. Before then, doing some consultancy work, working for primarily sort of national gas, doing various pipeline projects. Then ultimately getting enticed into National Grid, where I spent the last 15 years, or nearly 15 years, ultimately leading one of their new infrastructure teams and looking after their land policy and governance. And then I was fortunate enough, James, to have an opportunity to come and join you 9 weeks ago.
Which is excellent, and we're very pleased to have you here. So the aim of today is we're talking everything kind of transmission networks, but also we might slip into the old DNO network side, but that's what our focus is on. And for people listening, I think it'd be really useful for us to kind of just set the scene in terms of where we find ourselves today. I mean, on other podcasts, I've talked about the pressures we've got. There's lots of things going on, but maybe you're fresh from National Grid, where you really see where some of the pressure is coming. It'd be good to explain, why we are here even talking about this.
I guess there's two ways of looking at that, or main reasons why we're here trying to promote new networks and infrastructure. There is the changing sort of space of generation. So, you used to have your coal-fired power stations around the UK. They were centred on certain locations, and so the transmission network used to be centred around them. You've got the changing face of generation with a lot more renewables, solar, wind, offshore. And so those connection points across the UK are changing dramatically, and they all need to be connected up. There's also the changing face of usage. People are using power in very different ways. By the time, in another 10, 15 years, you're looking at households having an EV charging point, a heat source pump, an electric boiler. All of a sudden, most residences will need to be three-phase electric. So again,
total network upgrade across the whole network.
Yeah, and I think people that haven't quite worked this out. They will, I'm sure, but it is that whole we're turning from a fossil fueled powered economy to a renewable powered economy, which has a massive impact. But it is right down the chain where you get to actually, you can't develop a housing estate anymore with a gas connection. It's electricity, and I guess in terms of that, give an idea. Have you got an idea in terms of, you talk about connections, and we're involved with an awful lot of offshore wind, which I know currently as we're talking, there's an offshore wind wobble going on. I think it's a temporary wobble. I'm sure it will come back on stream. There's lots of other things like you talked about solar, but when you talk about connections, how many new connections are Grid looking at?
I mean, across the network, it's a huge number, and connection offers are given, and then they're kind of they're queued up at present. So people have been clambering to get a connection without having a project that was deliverable or consentable.
Yeah.
So that is a whole area where there needs to be reform, and they're looking at connection reform at the moment.
Yeah, and that's about to come out, isn't it?
It is, yes, due out any time. Yeah. And then so that relates to an awful lot of onshore connection stuff and offshore. Your onshore connections are also, there's a huge power requirement nowadays for data centres. That's new to the network.
Yeah,
some new technology there. And then the east coast of the country, the offshore wind is quite well developed. The Crown Estate have done their previous rounds of leasing, and that's been very successful. The west of the country is now starting to catch up.
Yeah.
So off the coast of Wales, Cumbria, all those offshore wind farms, again, having to connect into areas where there is no grid connection at the moment. So there's all that network improvement to facilitate what is required.
Yeah. Okay, and you talked about the connections, and that's always been a clamour, certainly for the last 10 years, of people wanting connections. And I think we had, certainly when, if you, I think back to the first, this is really DNO side, but the first solar, which is much smaller scale developments that went on probably 10 years ago, there was still the connection clamour, and people were just whacking in connection applications without even, like you say, a project. Now, I believe, although it's yet to be seen, but the new push on the connections will be very much on you have to have a real life project, you have to have your consents in place, etc., etc. I think all of that is about to come, isn't it?
I think so, and I think for us that means there might be a lot of work up front to help clients develop a properly consentable scheme that can then obtain an appropriate connection. Yeah, absolutely.
Good. So we set the scene in terms of there is a lot happening, and I think UK will, if they aren't already, will start seeing. Most people will see something change because there is going to have to be more infrastructure put in, but. Just let's go back to you and your involvement. So, you've got involved with lots of different bodies and bits and pieces in your work at Grid. Maybe just give us a bit of a run through of how you've been involved at kind of at the highest level, really, on some of these legislation changes, etc.
Absolutely. So the recent announcement this last week was a working group that I was sat on with two other colleagues, Jonathan Smith and Matt Ducker. With the CAV, the Central Association of Agricultural Valuers. They and their members were concerned that due to the scale and number of projects that were being promoted across the country, it was very important to try and develop better behaviours and relationships with both professionals and landowners to help that journey of trying to do things in a more appropriate way and deliver things quicker with less resistance and building those better relationships for the lifetime of the asset. So that was a really interesting working group to sit on, and that code of practice was published last week. On the back of the government directives, it's the industry view really is that to hit those targets, we need to go quicker. There is current legislation in place. We have.
So what when we say go quick, why do we want to go quicker? What's the driver?
These are big projects, and they take a long time to consent. The average time to consent and build a DCO is 7 to 9 years. So where we are currently sat in 2025 to hit the 2030 targets, that's a big push.
So there's the target, the 2030 target, which has been set by the government. They haven't wavered from that yet, although there's a lot of pressure for them to do it, isn't there?
There is, but at the moment, the regulatory regimes that sit around that, the ASTI and LOTI regimes with Ofgem, they're still targeting 2030 for a lot of projects. So that has to happen. So the desire to go quicker means we get to hit those targets quicker.
Yeah.
There is current legislation in place which enables us to promote projects. The NSIP regime with development consent orders.
Yeah.
Compulsory purchase orders being pursued under an enabling act with town and country planning. So it all works.
Yeah.
But it all takes time. So I was fortunate enough to be invited to quite a number of government working groups with DESNZ, the Department for Energy Security and Net Zero, to join and look at industry reform for CPO and also a bit of planning reform at the same time. So there was a consultation that was launched in 2022, and that sought feedback on the current consenting regime. That then resulted in the Windsor paper, the Windsor report, with the Electricity Transmission Commissioner, Nick Windsor.
Yeah.
So he made his report back into DESNZ and MHCLD, the Ministry for Housing, Local Government. That resulted in working groups being set up with DESNZ to look at what can we do, what is the current legislation, how can we improve it, what will be our wish list, what will be our aspiration, to try and then work through things to see how we could change to hit those targets.
Yeah. The UK PLC has a problem that it's trying to solve here. And, there are lots of ways of trying to do it, but we need people on board to do it. And, I think the key thing is that it's got to be a fair way that we do this, so that people are paid fair compensation for what affects them. Because obviously, the NIMBY world is still out there. No one wants it in their backyard, but unfortunately, it's going to have to go somewhere. But you need to do it in a pragmatic, proactive way, both sides of the fence, to make it work.
That links into that. I was sat on another government working group for the what's called the ADR task force, which was for alternative dispute resolution, which came out of the back of the Electricity Transmission Compensation Act. That was on the back of a private member's bill being promoted by MP Dr. Liam Fox.
Yes.
And that was levelled at concerns that he had in his constituency over the Hinkley project.
Yeah.
So that working group looked at different ways of dealing with mediation, making sure that landowners could have an appropriate, easily accessible method of mediation if they weren't happy with the compensation that they were receiving.
Yeah.
The results of that task force have been put forward to ministers, and we're now waiting to see what happens after that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it is very important.
Yeah, and I think, again, I can only talk about my experience, but generally, acquiring authorities are not there to try and rip people off. They want to pay the right amount of compensation. Now, you're right. People may have differing views, and that's where you have upper chamber to be able to go and, if you need to go that far. But I think I've done a recent podcast talking about expert witness and all that sort of side of things. And if you look at the number of cases that actually get to upper tribunal, it is minuscule, because most of them are negotiated and settled. And I think, that we don't want to end up taking people to tribunal. We want to try and make the whatever right is trying to be exercised, but you want it to make it as easy as you possibly can, both from a practical, pragmatic perspective, but also financial.
Absolutely.
And I think generally that's what most of certainly the clients of DM want to do.
Yeah, absolutely. The end result's got to be fair and equitable and suit all parties.
Yeah.
And the upper tribunal these days, they'd expect you to go through the various stages of alternative dispute resolution with mediation, expert determination, other mechanisms before you ever even applied to upper chamber. Yeah. So it is a journey that everyone is expected to go on to be fair and reasonable with all parties.
Yeah. Good. Okay, so that's the CAV. There are other clamours from various people, out there going, we want stronger powers for the electricity industry. We can't hope to get anything done. And I can see two sides of the fence here, in that I think certainly from the if you look at a DNO perspective, when you're looking at big transmission lines, like you said earlier, you've got the powers. You've got you can CPO, DCO. You've got those routes. When you're looking at the DNO network, though, I think that's where the challenges come a little bit more, because you've got smaller projects that don't have the money to actually fund maybe CPOs, because if you talk about small connection, the CPO dwarfs dwarfs the costs of what the actual whole connection costs. So I can see some of it. However, I do also think that sometimes the legislation isn't used in the best way, and I don't mean that in terms of used wrongly. I just mean sometimes I think there is legislation there, and it actually is there to help, not to hinder. And it's not that we go out with a big stick, but actually, sometimes you need that legislation to help you achieve the project. But I think what would be useful to hear from you is that there is a push, I know, by the industry in terms of reform. You've been involved in discussions with various bodies, particularly the Law Commission are doing stuff at the moment on CPO. Talk through those kind of bits and pieces that are going on at the moment.
Yeah, so there's been two very recent consultations from the Ministry of Housing, Local Government, and the Law Commission, both focusing on CPO, the current process for CPO. So just setting DCO to one side for now, purely focus on CPO. There are some primary differences between DCO and CPO. So DCO, under the Planning Act, does have a very set time frame. So that enables developers of infrastructure to promote projects, knowing that hopefully they can, within a defined programme, achieve what they need to.
Yeah.
CPO is very different. It has an undefined timeline.
Yeah.
And requires also planning application to be submitted in parallel under town and country planning to enable both of those items to enable to move forward. So there's been a lot of focus on trying to look at CPO reform. Quite a lot of industry bodies have been involved in these working groups that I've been sat on. You've had representatives across key stakeholders, NFU, CLA, members of the Energy Networks Association, which is made up of licence holders of all DNOs and TOs across the UK. And so everybody is fed back into that consultation process over the last 2-3 years as to what their aspirations on achieving greater rights might be. Not greater rights, greater powers, to facilitate the quicker application period, quicker delivery of getting to an end result of a consentable project. Yeah. The Energy Networks Association, they produced their 9-point plan, which was submitted to government.
Yeah.
And that is very much been a focus of some of these working groups, to try and work through that aspirational 9-point plan to try and get to what do we actually need to change in the industry with legislation to move forward. It's likely, I think, that there will be some changes. I think it's likely that there'll be some more bolstered government guidance come out to make the process clear to people, to landowners, householders who are going to be affected. What does it actually mean when someone comes along to promote a project? And I think that's a really good piece. It's an educational piece. Yeah. But if people are more aware of what's going on, then hopefully they can interact and deal better with the people promoting the project. However, to move at really serious pace, there would need to be sort of changes to primary legislation. Whether the government has got the appetite for that is yet to be seen. The previous government said all the right things. The current government said all the right things. But there are still no changes yet to primary legislation, apart from the promotion of the infrastructure and planning bill at the moment. Yeah.
So if you're a betting man, do you think there will be primary legislation change?
Well, I'm not a betting man because I'm a Yorkshireman, and I never bet because money is serious. If I was a betting man, in the short term, in the next 5 to 10 years, I wouldn't think there would be a change to primary legislation. Beyond that, to actually drive forward really heavily to get to net zero at 2050.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe.
And that's because we will not achieve what we want to achieve in the next 5 years. And there'll be a review as a result of it.
I think so. I think it's going to be a real challenge. I'd like to think as an industry we can get there and get it sorted out, but I think it's going to be a huge challenge to do so.
Yeah. Okay. And so you talk about CPO. In terms of the DCO, you just talked about planning infrastructure. There are some changes that are kind of, say, nearly out there, which are coming in. One of them is, the 3 main changes, aren't there? Do you want to talk through those 3 changes?
Yeah, the 3 main changes that have an impact, I think, to our clients in the world of land rights and promoting new infrastructure. And hopefully some of these will enable us to go quicker, which is going to be a win. you've got the changes proposed for the statutory consultation as part of that NC process. So Section 42 consultation, as we call it. That's a very defined process at present, and that defined process is likely to be amended or removed from future Act.
Just to be clear on that, though, that doesn't mean. I mean, I think anyone reading that in black and white would think, "Oh, no consultation." That doesn't mean that at all, does it?
Not at all.
No.
Not at all. There will still be a huge requirement at the end with the planning inspector. They will still expect a high level of very clear and concise consultation and feedback to make sure people have been brought on that project journey and that project has taken into account that consultation and all people's views. So it's not a watering down in any shape or form of that requirement. That requirement's still there. But what it does mean is that consultation can be done in a more flexible and appropriate way. Some people who are supporters of the scheme will require less consultation, as opposed to others who are more affected, impacted, have a greater hosting of the scheme, might require more consultation. So it enables the promoter to do that in a much more flexible manner and in a more appropriate way. That hopefully might reduce timelines.
Because the aim is to try and knock a year off, isn't it? I mean, that's what they've kind of said, isn't it?
That has been mentioned as to whether that can happen or not, to try and get still to that very high quality consultation. We'll see.
So there's still we're waiting for the paperwork, really, aren't we, on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's still in bill form at the moment. So we'll see if it passes through.
And then the other two.
So the other two, you've got temporary acquisition powers that have been languishing since 2017. They were part of the Neighbourhood Planning Act 2017. They've been sat there ever since, but were effectively never turned on. Under the bill, it looks like we're hoping to turn those temporary acquisition powers. So under a CPO, we can take permanent acquisition or temporary acquisition. So that means for an acquiring authority and those that are being affected by a project, it's much clearer. People aren't having to take something that they don't want in a permanent fashion if they only need it temporary. And then those affected can see very clearly that it is only temporary, therefore it's not a permanent effect. So a very simple change that's been sat there for a while, but I think it's an important one. It'll enable us to inform our clients better and inform the affected landowners much better as well. The third change relates to the changes proposed to the General Vesting and Declaration Act. So the effective GVD process, where at the end of obtaining an order and applying the compulsory acquisition rights, we go through a very set process of issuing general vesting declarations on an affected landowner. That's a very strict timeline, currently set at 3 months. It's likely to be reduced back to a number of weeks. So it's only a slight saving in general project timeline, but it still is a saving, still enabling people to promote things faster and get on the land quicker. The reason they've looked at doing that is by the time a developer has gone through the whole consenting process to develop an order, they've had to prove to get that confirmed that they have dealt with people in a very appropriate way, they've consulted appropriately, they've offered appropriate levels of compensation. So by the time all that has happened, we shouldn't have to wait at the end of that process to then vest the rights. Because we've met a very, very high test to be awarded the order.
Okay. The other bit that I wanted to talk about was the Electricity Act, in terms of, again, we don't know what's happening, ish. We kind of got some ideas, but maybe we can talk about that in a little bit of detail, what we think might happen to that.
So changes to the Electricity Act that might appear, again, as part of that government consultation and part of the proposal being put forward by ENA and others, is there are aspirational changes to try and move it forward.
My concern, and one of my concerns, is that you get a new government in. This one in particular come in, Ed Miliband shouting from the rooftops, going to do this, that, and the other, and it all very positive. And I just hope that they keep thinking like that and keep focusing their eyes on what we're trying to achieve here, rather than get diverted down a politicised angle. And as we get closer to an election, that's my concern, is that actually the good work that's being done to look at some of these problems gets undone because it's just not a vote winner. I think it'd be interesting to see what happens. Currently, everyone's saying the right thing out there at present, but if the government is very serious about hitting these targets, then there will have to be some form of change in the industry.
Otherwise, it is going to be a significant challenge to get there.
And I think it's quite interesting your analogy there earlier of how you think that actually there may be some small tweaks soon. Watch this space, but actually there will need to be some bigger tweaks in about 5 years' time. But I guess it depends who's running the country at that point.
It does depend. It depends on the aspirations, or it depends if those targets are moved or changed or go back a little bit. There's all sorts in play there, James, as to how it might play out.
So you've been in this industry for a long time, 30 years, about the same time as I've been in it. But I guess you must have in your mind what the perfect scenario is in terms of what you would like. And I think, to be fair, okay, you've worked on both sides of the fence, and I think I predominantly worked on the acquiring side of the fence. And I think everyone will assume that you and I will want it all stacked on the acquiring side, but I don't think that's right, is it? I think it's actually what people don't understand. I think is that a utility company or an infrastructure company will come in to do what they want to do. The way they look at it is, yes, they've got a job to do, but they also then have a relationship with that landowner forevermore, potentially, and they don't want to. They want a good relationship. Yeah. It makes life easier for everybody. And if you ignore all the politics, but what would your ideal scenario be for powers? For big question, this big for powers. For what do you think is a key to actually making this work better?
It's a very interesting question, and it's quite difficult to answer, I think, because it's got to be a balanced approach, hasn't it? So I guess you're all the way from the current situation with the Electricity Act and the current statutory regime and how we operate under CPO and DCO, all the way through to almost like warlike powers with notices to deploy, build infrastructure, compensate later. But I think whatever we do or however we end up, we've got to do it in a very balanced way because of that enduring relationship that you just mentioned. So transmission network, be it transmission or distribution, we're very different to other infrastructure promoters because of that enduring relationship. We have assets on land that need to be maintained for their lifetime, and therefore we've got to keep going back. We're not like a road scheme that takes the road or a rail scheme that takes the rail, fences it off, and that's it. That relationship is done. So it has to be always a very balanced approach. So it's then balancing that need to go quicker, whilst maintaining relationships and paying appropriate compensation. So you'd think hopefully there might be some middle ground in between perhaps where the Electricity Act is now, where the Water Industry Act has been. There might be something else as a hybrid in between.
Yeah. I mean, my view is that I don't think there's too much wrong with our system, actually. I think if you go down to the bones of it, it's good. It allows both parties to have to get a fair solution at the end of it, because not everybody's always right, and you've got the processes in place, whether it be the CPO process or whether it's you end up at tribunal. You've got the processes in place where if you really wanted to, you go and get your day in court and get the fair solution. So I think we've got it right. I think the challenge though is the speed, and it's also the resource. So you talked about DESNZ and the kind of the challenges that they've got with the potential work increase. You've got to resource up. And I think that's one of the big challenges.
Resource across the board, across all project disciplines, government is a huge challenge moving forward. So the electricity and distribution industry are promoting more CPOs and DCOs than ever before, and it's a monumental increase. It's not a small one. No. It's huge.
Yeah.
At the same time, you've got road, rail, other energy infrastructure, all promoting DCOs and CPOs at the same time.
Yeah.
So the casework with both PINs for DCOs and DESNZ and CPOs and the inspector requirement from PINs, it's just ramped exponentially.
Yeah.
And looking at what's coming in the industry, there's no sign of any of that slowing down at the moment. So resource is a big issue, and it's a challenge for lands, consenting, legal, trying to bring enough people into the industry to deliver what we need to.
And I think if you could get that resource right, but also cut away some of the timelines, and you look through the whole process, there are big chunks of time you go, what's happening then? You know, and we're beginning to see that a little bit. But I particularly, I think you could look at, in my head, almost a kind of different. Certainly, if you look at the necessary whaling process, for example, I think you could look at a very different, almost two scale, where you've got very small, not expensive projects going on. There is a quicker solution to it. There's quick fire because it doesn't need to have the full, inquiry and etc. I think that's the sort of thing they should be looking at.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think your earlier statement's right as well, James, in that the current system does work. It's not broken. So all the way through your DCO consenting, your CPO consenting, necessary wear leave, there's very set procedures within legislation. It works.
Yeah.
But it just doesn't move us there quick enough, fast enough.
Yeah.
It costs a lot. So is that ultimately for the benefit of the consumer?
Yeah.
When you consider the regulatory position? Yeah. If we got there quicker, cost less, everybody, we get to net zero quicker, it's a benefit to the end consumer.
Yeah. Good. Great, Oliver. Well, thank you for your time today. I say this to quite a few people, but I think actually we need to watch this space because I think the changes coming up, once we actually know what they are, we're going to have another chat and see what implications they have on speeding things up. But I think that'd be an interesting next step on this one. But thank you for your time. I'll let you go back up to Lancashire.
Thank you very much. I feel safer up there.
Anyway, great to see you. Thanks, Oliver.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thanks very much.